Oh my God!
In panic.
This is worth every drop of hype that was happening before this. Like, that was crazy. I don't know. This podcast just got taken over by talking about Planet Earth, but it needs to be talked about because that scene was incredible. Like, I couldn't even imagine being one of those lizards.
Cinetherapy podcast with Sam and Mitch. Or Dad.
Welcome to the Cinetherapy podcast by Inland Film Co. I'm Mitch Williams, joined by Sam McGhee. This is episode 5, where we sit down with a special guest, composer and DP Kevin Graham. In this installment, we chat with Kevin about scoring films, writing music for others to use, our mutual relationship with Artlist, and more. A quick disclaimer for this week's podcast. This is the first week we've invited a guest onto the show. We were limited on recording options for the third microphone and third channel, so please forgive any of the blemishes in the audio recording this week you might hear. We promise to be more prepared the next time we welcome a guest on the show. Thank you for your patience. Enjoy. I'm going to start this with a hello, Sam. How are you? And we'll talk for just a couple seconds, and then we'll say this.
Is there like a general list of topics, or am I just going to...
We're going to ask you questions.
I enjoy people. And this is one good way that I can figure people out.
Yeah, while they're on the spot and it can't be edited or changed.
You know, I think that's
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I think that's perfect. A perfect intro. That other voice that you hear, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any ladies that listen to this show, ladies and gentlemen.
My mom listens to it.
There will be now.
Yes. Now that Kevin Graham is here. I said it. The other voice you hear is Kevin Graham.
Sam. Mitch, you're taking notes on a computer. I've got my phone. Kevin has a notepad.
I like to take notes on a notepad. I feel like it makes you look more like attentive.
That's true.
Like in a meeting?
There was a Mitch does that. When we're in meetings, Mitch pulls out notepad. Because it does, number one,
because if you're on your phone, they're like, are you like playing Flappy Bird or texting, or do you care about
exactly
the project I'm trying to give you? Or?
Exactly.
We have a special guest this week, Kevin Graham, first guest ever on the show, and Google Docs is not updated with me. So, Kevin, how have we been connected here today? We know each other and whatnot, but what brought us together in the universe today?
Yeah, so I write music for a number of licensing libraries, probably Artlist being the biggest one for me. And they do a series of films spotlighting certain composers and other like members of their team. And we've been talking about doing a film that I'm featured in for the past, I don't know, talking about for a couple weeks now, probably. And they said, yeah, well, we've got a filmmaker you can work with to, make this happen. I assumed they were going to like send somebody over. And no, it turns out the person they knew was just Mitch and Sam at Inland Film Co. And I know them and I work like 20 minutes away from them. So works out perfectly. So yeah, we're just over here talking about like logistics and sort of some initial aesthetic things and production notes for making the film happen.
So why not shove you into a hot seat and ask you questions into a microphone?
Well, yeah, you kind of just tack that on afterwards, and I could only be here in the morning, so now I'm talking into a microphone.
Yeah. So I actually can I introduce how I know Kevin?
Yeah.
In my experience as a cinematographer and as a color grading artist, Kevin was my first big inspiration. I had just moved out of the world of DSLRs and janky tech videos into my first big cinema camera, and I got to go sit down at Kevin's office, and he's color grading raw footage, and it looks so cool, and I'm just in awe. But he's also got a guitar in his hands, and he's just sort of chilling, playing guitar and color grading, and telling me like,
you don't play guitar when you color grade? I thought that's what we had to. That's just how I assumed you had to, or it wouldn't look good.
So everything that we are doing today sparked the first time I got to walk into Kevin's office, and I realized, oh my gosh, there is a world of good cinematic imagery and color grading that is tangible, and it made sense. And so you are the first person that really inspired me to actually want to go figure out how to make things look the way I wanted them to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and it's especially cool because a lot of the work you do, I see, and it's like cool and inspiring, like to me. So it's just goes back and forth. And I feel like we've all had those people where, like, when we were first starting out, where you're like, how do they do that?
Yeah.
Like, I just want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
It's like when I was shooting on nothing but like Mark IIIs,
Yeah.
you know, back in the day, like getting into like shooting on cinema cameras and stuff. It's just like, you know, at first you're like, what even is this? This thing is giant, and I don't know how to make it look good. Like, we all have just sort of those people and influences like at the beginning. So
Yeah.
that's really cool to hear.
Dude.
I appreciate it.
Also, most of my best friends growing up, doing anything creative on a computer, they had a guitar in their hands. And so Kevin
It just helps everything. Yeah, like when I do billing,
Related.
I got a guitar in my hand.
Billing. Yeah. Gosh. You are guilt tripping me into pulling my guitar out. Just talking about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know the last time I did. And I just feel
you got to bring it
awful.
in here.
Maybe I should. And just hold it during the next podcast.
Yeah.
Just hold it during the next podcast.
But I mean, good luck not playing it during the podcast, though, because you can't just hold a guitar.
It's true.
Like-
Well, Conan O'Brien during rehearsals. Conan O'Brien has he has an electric guitar that he just holds and plays. I love it.
That is
Yeah,
funny.
It's excellent.
Oh, come on.
Is that
Mitch.
you or me?
That is you.
Mom.
I am muted.
So, Kevin, we know you're a composer. We know you're a filmmaker. What came first?
Definitely music came first, in terms of just me, what I like to do. In terms of being a professional and having a career, filmmaking came first. But yeah, like, I always knew that I liked music growing up, even before I knew. I mean, I have just made music my whole life, most of it being absolutely terrible before I knew anything about actual music. But yeah, I mean, are you asking for sort of like a brief summary of
No, it doesn't matter where it goes. I don't have any expectations for the answer to the question. I think what I'm going to get to, which we can just jump straight into, is, you know, what's your long-term goal or vision with both? Do you want to go the route of being a composer on films, or do you want to go the route of being a DP or a director, or both?
Well, I like doing both. Like, I can't see myself not only doing one, not doing the other. I definitely, like, music is my thing that I love the most in terms of, like, what I'm passionate about doing. And I actually really really like writing licensing music and writing my own music, because I've done scores too. I just scored an indie feature called Fight, that's on the festival circuit now.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah,
Keep going.
and those are it's like it's foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Scoring to picture is awesome because it makes you write things you would never write, because you're reacting to visuals, you're getting inspired by visuals, your things are coming into your mind based on what is happening in these visuals that in turn are based on what somebody else had in their mind. So like I wouldn't have wrote a single note of the score for Fight had I not seen that movie, and I think that's really cool. But what I like the most is writing music that's 100% like my own, that comes from, you know, different places and experiences and things that I'm inspired by, and then seeing how other people like use that in their films, because it's crazy seeing my music used in stuff that I wouldn't have even begun to think you could like put this with that, or, you know, like certain different ads or, you know, videos or whatever. And it's just cool to see how creative people are, like to hear my music used in stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have thought that it would be able to be used in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just a cool feeling.
That's awesome.
That's powerful.
That's really cool. In last week's episode, we talked about music and film. And I had mentioned to Sam that I like to cut a story before adding music, because I want the story matters first, and then the music's there to elevate the story. And oftentimes, a lot of filmmakers cut to music, and then it's almost like you're giving the music the attention and not the story. And so how was that experience putting music to a film that was already cut? Did they send you temp music, or were you just inspired based on the visuals that you saw in front of you?
Generally, and also specifically with that film, there would be temp music in an edit, or at the very least, like the director would send you like examples of music of like the vibe that they're looking for. So with that, they were actually licensing a lot of my music for temp music. So that made it pretty easy, because the temp music was music that I had written that I was intimately familiar with.
Yeah.
So I could kind of, and they did a great job of saying what they liked about certain things, what they wanted certain cues to do, and where they wanted to be. I'm a very like regimented person, so I had like an Excel spreadsheet of like the time codes of every cue and how long it was going to be, and like what, if any, theme it had to reflect, because it was a very theme-based score with certain characters each having their own themes, and then kind of without giving too much away, their stories are kind of woven together, and it sort of reaches like a pinnacle at the end. So that was a cool spot where like I was using elements of all of their themes in one cue basically, so that was cool. But
That's awesome.
yeah, generally like they'll sort of have like a rough idea with temp tracks of how they want the music to sound, where they want it to be, and there's always changes to those things too. I mean, the edit even changed a little bit as I was working on it, which is never ideal, but overall those changes make it better. So yeah, basically just following temp tracks, talking with the director. I never sat down for like a spotting session with this one, but I mean they were so good at communicating on Skype and email and stuff that we kind of were always on the same page.
Awesome. Where are they based out of?
That they were based out of St. Catherine in Canada.
Okay. And how did they find you?
They found me just because they were using all my music as temp music from like Artlist.
So cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and
That's so cool.
I've had a couple. I've gotten a couple jobs basically just from that, from people either using my music as temp music from a licensing site, or like finding me on like SoundCloud and wanting that same vibe or whatever. So it's definitely a cool way to
badass.
market.
We've used a lot of your music in our stuff.
Yeah, and I love seeing it too. I love like on the dailies and even in other projects, just the fact that you like it enough to use it. It's cool.
I think what I like, because so we were just talking about like, okay, so if there's gonna be an artist profile film about Kevin Graham, what does it look like? And we joked about, you see a lot of either composers or musicians walking around looking cinematically around their city, and I don't like, you as a person, you're more of an outdoor adventure kind of guy, and so I think what I like about your music is that I get this sense of adventure, and I get this sense of it just feels so grand. It doesn't feel like it's city. I feel like I'm outdoors, and Mitch and I fly fish, and we hike into these remote places, and it gives me that vibe.
It's the word, as you're saying this, that comes to mind to me is like limitless. And in reference to other musicians or composers that you find, there is a limit to where you would use their music.
That's good.
And also in that urban setting, that vibe, there's a limit, I guess. And so I really appreciate your music.
Yeah, well, I appreciate hearing that. I don't know if that was I have an album called Limitless. I don't know if that was like a subtle like
It
drop.
was not. It was not.
It wasn't?
No, it was not
I thought it was.
based on the album.
I was like, it's clever.
That is
clever.
fantastic.
But yeah, no, that's really cool to hear. I appreciate that. I'm glad that comes across in my music because 90% of it is sort of born in places that I like to be, which is like the mountains and backpacking and the wilderness and stuff. I mean, yeah,
That is fantastic.
I love that.
I'm sure that there might have been some subconscious, like remembering that deep in my brain, but that was not I was trying to think.
No,
I was gonna say boundless, but that sounds stupid. Limitless is way cooler. Without bounds, still sounds dumb. That is awesome. Have you mentioned hearing your work in ads? Are there any ads that other people might have seen that you've seen your work in?
I mean, not a lot of broadcast stuff. Well, it's kind of actually hard to know because it's hard to, keep track of that. But less specific ads and more just seeing big brands use your stuff in like branded content, whether it's online or, I mean, I guess it would be online, but like, seeing a company like National Geographic use a cue of yours or DJI Global or just recently like Film Pack, like it's sort of like teaches you and just like tells you like, hey, like you're actually not that terrible. Like, because I mean, I'm sure you guys deal with it too. Like just being a composer, filmmaker, whatever, like just all the time there's just random moments of like, insecurity, like, or just, perfectionism where you're like, this isn't good, it sucks. But then you see like your music being used in ways like that and you're like, okay, well, I mean, it's good enough for them, so I'm at least doing something right.
Right on.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's some positive target fixation, right?
Yeah.
Positive target fixation.
No, I'm serious because had you not taken, I think we spoke about it a couple weeks ago. There's putting any work out there. There's like a risk. There's some sort of risk of someone hating it.
Yeah. What if people reject it?
Yeah.
What if they hate it? What if they say that's the dumbest piano sound I've ever heard? Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
And little things.
I would say to those people, if they were referencing Kevin Graham, I would say to those people, so what music did you put out this week?
Right.
I would say, because like you are, every album you put out on Artlist, every song there's a risk in people not liking it, but it's also the only way people are going to hear you and know what you're capable of. And I don't know if you have any work that you look back on and you do think, oh, that sucked.
Oh yeah, a ton.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Lots of which is on Artlist and Soundstripe and music. I mean, I tend to be my own worst critic when it comes to my work, especially my creative work. So, yeah, there's always stuff that could be better. I mean, like I'm in the middle of working on an album right now, and I've restarted every single track like 4 or 5 times just because it's just, I think it's sounding good, and then the next day you go back and you listen, and you're just like, oh wow.
And we would probably hear it and be like, oh, that is freaking awesome.
So it's just, yeah. But I try not to be negative about it. I try to just just have really high standards for how I want things to sound and the way that I want them to like make me feel, and in turn make anybody else listening.
That's a good way to
feel.
say it. He's trying not to be negative, and just thinking of it as a standard for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
a good way to
it's
flip
easier said than done when you're
Right,
when you're
right.
super stoked on something and then the next day you're not.
Right.
But if you just look at it as, okay, well, I've made that mistake and I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to use that reverb again. I'm not going to use those notes again because I don't like the way they sound and they don't sound good. And it's the biggest thing is just like having an idea in your mind that you think is just awesome and going to work, and then actually making it happen tangibly, like with notes and sounds, and realizing it doesn't work and being able to let go of that or change it. Like once I learned how to do that, I feel like my music got a lot better because I stopped trying to force ideas into an arrangement that just wouldn't work. You kind of discover what works and what doesn't.
That's cool.
You had some more notes.
I don't have any segues into the notes that I had.
There's the segue.
you are a composer, but you're also a filmmaker, and you're working on a project for a client, and then the client has footage that they want to put in to something that you're making, and it's usually like from a phone or from an old camera. And we were joking about, like, okay, so say you've got like a cinema wide project, and you don't want to just take the client footage from a phone and make it go edge to edge, because it's not going to look good. And then you also don't want it to look like it's something that you shot. There, you got to come up with some sort of an artistic way to differentiate the two. But I guess we were talking about that earlier before we started recording, and I thought it was an interesting topic.
Well, I think you just have to be very clear with the client what the purpose of those assets are in the project. What if you can be on the same page with them as to what the purpose of including that material in the edit is, I think that you'll be okay. Because if they're coming in and in their mind, this iPhone footage is going to cut seamlessly with these Cinema DNG raw files, like if in their mind it's just like, oh, well, this is just shots of this content that you guys couldn't get, due to timing restrictions or whatever, and we can just throw this in the edit, it'll be fine. You've got to say, okay, well, that's just not going to work. Like, it's not going to look the same. It's going to sort of just bring down the value of the project.
Right.
It's going to draw people out of the edit when it happens. But so you kind of just have to have that conversation. If the point of having this is to keep it real, keep a sense of realism in the project, then there's things you can do to sort of, like, are you asking like specifically in terms of like adding grain or the way you frame it in the edit to make it
kind of
clear?
I like what you just said, though, because first you got to figure out, why does this have to go in there?
Yeah, because if in your creative mind it doesn't need to be in there and you can convince the client of that, that's awesome. But if it does, and oftentimes it does, like, for example, doing like I do a lot of stuff for like March of Dimes, telling people's stories. I can't really travel back in time and go into the NICU as these babies are born, 3 months premature. So we're relying on a lot of assets from the family, whether it's stills or hopefully video, to put into the story to be that visual part. And as long as you can do that in a way to where the audience understands that this is just authentic home footage, basically, then you can use that to your advantage, really. And it's better that it's in there versus just trying to, like, I don't know, do a dramatization. That would be really intense. Actually, that'd be actually pretty sweet.
The reason I brought it, the reason I like that I brought that up, though, is that you said, talk about whether or not it should be in there. And I think that's something we get a lot, is we'll go in and sit down with a client and talk about a new film we're going to make. And they'll be like, oh, well, we already shot all this stuff, so here's all the footage. I'm like, well, we don't.
For us, oftentimes, if somebody else shot something, we don't want to take away from that person, I guess, especially if it was another filmmaker or a filmmaker in town. We don't want to take away from that person that they like act like it was ours, if that makes sense. So like all of a sudden they see an ad show up and half of the ad has their footage in it. It would, I know on our end, it'd be like, well, it kind of sucks that person's using our footage, and we're not doing videos or films for them anymore.
Yeah, we've all had that happen.
Totally.
we've all had that happen.
Yeah, and I think to me it's more of trying to show respect. We're working with a client right now in wealth management, and there's a filmmaker that is working out of their office, and he's doing films for them, and we like him. He's come to our studio and he's rented the space before and whatnot, but there've been requests on the occasion of like, well, let's use his content for the videos that you guys do, or vice versa. And it's like, well, I want to respect what he's got in the pipe and that's his work. I don't want to just take his stuff and slap it on, and then also I don't I don't think he's wanting to do the same. It's trying to show that, I guess, that's for us. Internally we have that conversation all the time.
And that's such a cool dynamic. That one's cool because we've kept that respect. And he's actually come to us and said that he enjoys the fact that we're able to work on the same project at the same time, and we're both helping them. And so I think maintaining that level of respect has helped our relationships. See, there's a whole bunch of topics within that one, because I think I started off with the idea of like getting iPhone footage from a client, and how do you make it, in my mind I was thinking, how do you make it look good if it has to be in there? But then we got on a totally other long tangent of like all the possibilities. Do we reshoot it? Do we just not leave that in? Does that not go in the story at all?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Because the reason I brought it up is because we talked about, we made a film for your grandma's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to bring this back up. It was a family film. It was fun to make, and we did a lot of interviews. We brought all of our gear and did interviews with family. It was incredible. I think our family's used to that though. If Mitch and Sam show up with all the gear,
it was the dumbest time to do this film too, because we had like 3 other big projects due within the same week.
We literally edited this long film, and then we're exporting it on our way to the birthday party where we were going to show it. Yeah. It was exporting from the laptop. We unplugged the laptop from the wall adapter, let it export. We had the drive sitting on top of the laptop. Driving there, got there to the house, laid the laptop down, and plugged it back into the wall just to make sure that Premiere didn't die. Yeah. But I brought this up because we had some people were out of town, and they shot some interviews on their phone, and they sent them in, and we wanted it to feel different. We wanted it to feel like it was an artistic decision to have somebody send phone footage in. So we made a white matte. It was cinema wide, whatever the aspect ratio was. We made a white matte, and we put it in a square, and we made it grainy, and it felt like it was meant to be that way, but it was also kind of a cop-out of like, well, we can't just stretch 720 footage from an old phone to all the way wide. But it helped. People felt like there was a reason for that.
You knew it was a shot on somebody's phone.
I also did feel bad though, because the guy who filmed it did put a lot of work into framing and the background and the way she was lit. He did put a lot of work into it.
It was awesome.
But he got grain.
He got grain.
Yeah, that's one of my... Because, I mean, you watch, like... I don't know. You watch, like, a feature film that's, like, based on a true story, where, like, at the end, they have, like, actual footage of whatever's happening. Like, I can't quite remember. I don't know if it was, like, The Founder or something similar to that, where, like, at the end, they have actual authentic footage. But that's kind of become really common, I think, is that sort of just... they'll either have it like a perfect 1x1 square, like a 4x3, or like a smaller, like 16x9 square within the bigger, like aspect ratio, and that it doesn't fill the screen. And just, I feel like when they sort of downsize the footage like that, it just adds that extra like layer of like, okay, there's no doubt this is different. Yeah, this is different for a reason. Like this, there's a specific reason why this all of a sudden is framed like this, and that's because it's real footage. Because I could see, like, it's hard to like put yourself in the shoes of like a normal viewer, because like any one of us would see that and be like, that footage looks a lot different. But sometimes you're like, would normal people notice that? Maybe not. So the fact that it's you kind of put it in its own little world of like a different size, like you're saying you did with that film, kind of just leaves no doubt.
I want to circle back to some of the composing stuff. I because I'm fascinated by it. You said you don't think you could ever choose one over the other, or you could do one and not the other. If you were to be, let's just say in the world of filmmaking, if you were a director of a film, would you want to also compose it, or would you rather trust it?
That's a great question. To me personally, that sounds like a nightmare. Only because I've worked on big projects where I was sort of in charge of creating the film, like directing it and editing it, and also doing the music. Yeah. And it's just a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. And me personally, sometimes you feel like you get stretched too thin creatively, and you can't give like all of the necessary thought and like creative energy to any one aspect. You're kind of just having to like do everything. So
I imagine if you were to score your own film while you were scoring it, you would also be in director mode at times.
I probably would be
thinking,
yeah,
we need to cut that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd probably just be judging the film super hard while I'm scoring it, and then I'd be mad because the picture was supposed to be locked, but now I'm the one making the decision to unlock it, even though I'm the one who it's screwing over. So, yeah, I just
that's a good question.
I would prefer to do one or the other. And to sort of answer your earlier question about like what, like I would much rather see myself in the future, like working in the music world of scoring and doing like high-end music work than doing a lot of like director and DP stuff, just because I don't really like being in the city that much, as lame as that sounds.
Doesn't sound lame at all.
Like I would just, I would prefer the lifestyle that I could have of like living somewhere cool, and which to me means not around tons of people.
Right on.
And being able to like make music than having to live in LA or Nashville or New York or any big hub that you'd have to live in to sort of be like regular director of photography on those big projects.
I like that.
I realized I didn't really answer your question earlier, so I wanted to circle back.
You
was weighing on my conscience.
Good. I'm glad. I hope it was a real heavy weight.
It was, but
Good.
It's lifted.
Good.
It's gone.
Good.
Gains.
Gains and grains.
Yeah. I think that's the name of this podcast.
Yeah. Gains and grains.
With Z's, of course.
Yes, with Z's.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. The camera of choice that you have, not camera of choice, but the camera that you chose.
Yeah, so I shoot on the Ursa Mini Pro 4.6K for a few reasons, and I'll caveat all of this by saying I'm not one of those people who's like a brand snob or a gear snob. Like I have an iPhone, but I don't care. Like I'm not I don't care if my iPhone magically turned into a Samsung tonight and I woke up tomorrow and it was a Samsung. I'd be like, oh, I'll just learn it and it'll be fine. Like I'm not one of those people. So in terms of Blackmagic versus Canon versus Sony versus Nikon, all that, I don't really buy into the whole like there's only one solid choice and nothing else is right.
Well, because there is, and it's the Arri Alexa Mini. And
okay, that's fair enough. That's actually completely accurate. But maybe in terms of this world of cinema cameras, I shoot on the Blackmagic just because the main reason is just because of how familiar I am with it. I know the camera very well, and I know what it can do and what I need to do to make it look a certain way. Anything from exposure to white balance to anticipating what I'm going to be doing in the grade, so I'm shooting it a certain way. I really like the Cinema D&G RAW workflow. Mm-hmm. I think it works well, especially because I grade in like DaVinci Resolve, and it, the same company that makes the camera makes the software, Blackmagic. Yeah. So it seems to really play really well with that. It doesn't have really high frame rate capabilities, which is kind of annoying sometimes. I mean, it goes up to 48, so you can get all that sort of cool, dreamy type stuff, but like, because the FS7 goes to what, 200, 120?
It's 180 internally.
I know you start getting into resolution restrictions when it's windowed HD or whatever.
Yeah, and it's not windowed HD.
Okay,
it does do the full. Let's talk about the Sony. No, it does 180 at 1080 full window, but it also, if you do the raw output, it'll do I think it's 240 at 2K, which we don't ever do.
I was gonna say that's great. It's hefty file sizes, I'm sure.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think I debated on whether or not to get the Blackmagic when we got our FS7. And the only reason I didn't get the Blackmagic is because they weren't shipping it and they were way behind, and I needed to get a camera for a project. So we went with the Sony.
Yeah. And the FS7 is great. I've only shot on it a handful of times, but I really like it. It's, to me, the biggest thing that maybe a lot of people don't like about the FS7 is they're scared of S-Log. They get in the grade and they're like, OMG, I don't know what to do. This looks terrible. I'm scared.
Yeah.
Because they have a LUT in their monitor, and then they get into the grade, and then they're actually like, well, darn it. But the FS7 is probably one of my favorite like cameras to shoot on, just because I'm a sucker for the high frame rates.
Yeah,
so
that's good. I mean,
certain things if you're shooting like a dude welding, or like kids blowing bubbles, or things that just generally naturally look cool.
Yeah.
In slow motion, 240 is better than 48.
True. I like that. I mean, I get that. I think that that's true. We do some med spa films, and there are times when I'll pop into 180 frames a second, and we'll film something and it looks really cool, and then we'll pop back into 24, and whatever we were just filming in slow motion suddenly became really cool when we watched it back in real time. Because I think seeing it in slow motion felt cool, and then when we have like really took in the needle that was happening in real time, it got real. I don't know.
Like, you're saying you filmed the same thing again in 24, or you just played it back?
Yeah, we filmed the same thing again in 24, and suddenly the moment felt real. Now that I've seen it in slow motion, it dawned on me that I really liked it in real time.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot too.
And if we're going to ever film anything in slow-mo, even if it's 60, we're always going to shoot it in 24 a second time or the first time, just to get the natural sound. Because like you're talking about welding, if we have something in 180 frames a second, but you don't have any sound to go with it, it
doesn't record the sound along with the file. Okay.
No, if you're in slow motion on that, a lot of people I've noticed, if they want 60 frames a second, they'll film the FS7 has I don't know if the Blackmagic does this too, but it has a base frame rate for whatever
project and a sensor, so you can film it in 48 frames per second and then play it back on a 24 frames per second timeline, so it plays back in slow motion.
So if you do that on the FS7, it doesn't record audio.
Lame.
But if you record it in a base frame rate of 60 frames a second, it does record audio.
So it just plays back at normal speed, and then you have to slow it down yourself.
Yeah.
It does. That's interesting. Because you can't see it in the field then. You can't see what you're getting.
Exactly. And here's the major issue I have with that. If you switch on this camera, if you switch to a base frame rate of 60 frames a second, the monitor that we use, the small HD, will automatically figure that out. That's great. But then when I switch back to 24 or 30 for some people who want
Gross.
30. Thank you. Okay, so
the worst.
If you switch back, the FS7, if you're sending a signal to an external monitor that's not the stock monitor, it suddenly flips a switch internally that sends like a totally different signal out. And so now the monitor doesn't work. And it's happened to me in the field a couple of times. And I didn't, for a long time I wasn't carrying the stock monitor, but now we do keep it in our Pelican, because flipping between frame rates like that was sending weird signals to the monitor, and then we had to go deep into the dumb Sony settings. And I think that is a moment when I think the Blackmagic has such an easy menu, and they always say they're a software company first, and I think that translates so well into the user experience. And I love our Sony camera, but the menu and the way that settings flip on and off, it's like sometimes it gets really confusing. You have to know your gear. You have to know your gear. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, in terms of the things that I like about the Blackmagic, you just touched on one of them. The menu is great. I would like the Ursa Mini a lot less than the Ursa Mini Pro, because the Pro has those toggle switches on the outside where you can control shutter angle and white balance and ISO. I mean, I don't touch the ISO. It's 400 on that camera. It looks terrible. But I like those because the Mini, not the Mini Pro, and the original Ursa, which I shot on, which weighs about 1,000 pounds, which I wouldn't ever recommend anybody filming on, because it's like carrying around an IMAX camera basically. Everything is touchscreen. If you want to change something, you have to open that screen and change it on there. You can't toggle. Like if you're like shoulder mounted, you got to take that camera off and or have an AC open it up for you. And so I like where and they're all user programmable on the Ursa Mini Pro, which is great. So I like those. I like the built-in ND, which I think the FS7 has as well, like up to like 10 stops or whatever. But as far as recording audio and slow motion at the same time, the Blackmagic does do that. You can set your project frame rate at just normal 24, let's say, and then your sensor at 48. So it plays back at slow motion. It's playing 24 frames per second, but there's twice as many of them. But it still records the audio, and it doesn't slow it down or anything. It basically just what happens then is the first half of your clip has audio. So if you were to unlink the video and the audio, speed up the video 200%, then it would all match.
Nice.
And I do that a lot. So if I'm filming things where I can only film them once, like I do a lot of work for a fruit processing company down in the Yakima Valley, to where I just go down there at like, you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're going and filming harvest all morning. Like you basically have one chance to get a lot of these shots. Yeah. So I'll stay in 48 because I can live with in post speeding up 48 to be 24, especially for certain things. I think it actually looks better. It kind of has that Saving Private Ryan, very crisp, movement type thing. But in that case, I'll roll on everything in 48, and then in the edit, I'll figure out what looks good real time, what looks good slow motion, and then you have all the audio too. So it's kind of messy. You kind of have to keep track of where the audio is, and then like in the final mix, embellish things because if it's slow motion, you only have half that audio, so you got to figure out how to make that's a whole different topic, making sound effects for slow motion shots. What does that sound like?
By the way, you do a good job of that. That's one of the things that I've always noticed in your guys' work is that you always, if you do have a slow motion shot, you do have Foley sound design that goes with it. You guys do an awesome job of that.
Well, thanks. Yes. Yeah. It's just a lot of experimenting with slow motion shots because it's like this doesn't exist in the real world.
Right.
This doesn't sound like anything. I have to figure out what this sounds like. Yeah. And normally it's like shifting the original audio down a couple cents and then like adding some cool reverb and maybe layering some other stuff. But it's cool to be creative with sound effects for like slow motion shots. Yeah. Because with stuff that's like 200 frames per second, that's even more difficult. Like, what does that sound like?
There's a couple of YouTube channels where they do just slow motion or like how things are made or how things work. Scientific YouTube channels. There's one guy, I cannot remember the name. I'm not going to remember it now. I'm not going to look it up. But he did do a whole video on how he designs the sounds for the slow motion stuff, and he showed that he has a sound a Foley sound designer that does this. And so they'll do like they showed a tomato exploding in slow motion at like 1,000 frames per second. And he goes, they show the audio engineer like taking fruit in a bowl and smashing it's just into a microphone, and it's so weird when you see him do it. But then when you watch it back, the tomato exploding and the sounds, oh my gosh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But he had to figure out
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you, me and my better half, we were just watching this show. We're in the middle of this show called, I think it's just called Life. It's like a BBC. It's like Planet Earth type stuff. Like it's like narrated by David Attenborough, the same guy. So like that, like shows like that. Do you know what the show I'm talking about?
I think so.
Have you seen like Planet Earth and those?
Yeah.
Those shows to me are like the gold standard of like sound designing for things, because they're all these weird super like slow motion shots of like a frog like killing a like grasshopper with its tongue or whatever, and they have these just absolutely gnarly sound effects going on. Yes. And they're just amazing. Like I would love to know like how they do that and what the process is. So yeah, if you really want to see some ridiculous sound design, just go on Netflix and watch the show Life. It's just like a Planet Earth type thing.
Right on.
Yeah.
Is Life the same one where there's that that clip of the iguana that was running through and all the snakes were trying?
I think that was Planet Earth
2.
Planet Earth 2. Yeah. That was one of those things where I had like seen all the like memes and stuff online, and I was like, okay, this is probably getting too overhyped. And then when we finally got around to watching that, like, I don't know, a month ago or so, I was like, oh my God,
in panic.
This is worth every drop of hype that was happening before this. Like, that was crazy. I don't know. This podcast just got taken over by talking about Planet Earth, but it needs to be talked about because that scene was incredible. Like, I couldn't even imagine being one of those lizards. That just sucks. Like, if that's your life, I would live somewhere else, to be honest. I don't know why they still go to that same beach.
Living in the city.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's living in the city. So yeah, sound effects.
That's fantastic. Maybe we can, sort of end it with maybe the most inspiring or your favorite film or most recent film that you've seen, a filmmaker that you
he did just talk about Life, by the way.
He did talk about Life.
That's different. I mean, that's more of like a documentary type vibe, although man, what they do on those is ridiculous. I'm probably the most annoying person in the world to watch those with, because I'm always just like, how did they get that shot? The camera's like 2 feet away from this like giant colony of like meerkats, and like they don't even like look at it, but like you can tell based on like the motion of the camera that it's close to them. It's not a wide angle. So anyways, I digress. It's crazy. I don't know how they do it, but they do a good job.
That could be a whole podcast topic, is
just geeking out over how they get these shots of like animals.
Yeah, and then our wives, girlfriends, significant other, you use better half. I like that. What their experience of watching things with us. My wife
I don't envy them at all.
No, my wife has started to say, like, if we want to go, if we've got time at the end of the night, she wants to watch a movie. She started to say, I want to watch a movie, but I don't want to evaluate cinema right now.
The amount of times I pause.
The amount of times we have to pause and rewind. Rewinding. The new Apple TV remote, if you swipe and push really fast, it goes back 15 seconds, which is just enough. And so she won't let me hold the Apple TV remote because she knows that I can do that.
It's a curse, man. It really is an affliction that we all have.
This is okay. So your 3-part question.
No, yeah, I think it was our first podcast. I spoke about, we watched Reed Morano's film, I Think We're Alone Now. She directed the first 3 episodes of Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
Anyways, I still think about this film. We were talking about anamorphics before you showed up.
Sure.
And she loves her anamorphics.
By the way, good point to make. You asked if you were going to like direct, would you also do the composing? Reed Morano directs and is DP for most of her stuff.
That's tough too, because like, I don't know, personally, when I'm like filming like an interview, for example, I am like 100% like, is it in focus? Is the framing right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, like the interviewer will like ask me like, all right, so do you think we got everything we need? I'm
was
like,
that good?
They said a lot of stuff and it looked good. Like, I don't know. You tell me.
The times that I've had to run camera and Sam's not there, it happened a lot in the spring when he broke his leg. And he's over in the distance and interviewing, and we're walking around Oldcastle, the construction or the concrete company, and everything I recorded, I was like, I literally do not know what they said. I hope to God we get back, because I was only focused on how the picture looked and that they were in focus and everything. Anyways, so, and my side of, this whole area of filmmaking is more being on that like directorial side.
Yeah.
So it's stressful. I couldn't imagine.
It is. Yeah, it is stressful. Just worrying about not only, because when you're the DP, basically the director's like, this is what I need. This is what I want to feel. Make me feel it. Make this look like this. And like, okay, sweet. When you're both, you have to do both of those things at the same time. And especially if there's like, schedule crunches or whatever, it's just, the logistics of doing that sort of stuff are a little bit more challenging to me. I mean, there's situations where it's probably easier to be the director and the DP because you know there's no middle, like you have to communicate with yourself. That's it.
Right.
But I guess it depends on the project.
Right.
I like doing one thing because then I can just put all my energy into that.
Yeah, agreed.
So yeah, sorry.
No,
I forgot the question that you were.
That really quick. I'll get back to the question. That reminds me, we were filming. I don't know how deep I want to dive in, or how much I want to dive into this client, but it's a car dealership, let's just say, and we show up.
We've all had those.
Yes, and all of the hoods of these cars are covered in dirt, and they were supposed to know we were supposed to come film and whatnot. And I'm like, we need to clean these cars. This is going to look awful. And this guy runs in and he walks out and he starts chucking towels to people, like microfiber towels. And he chucks one to me, and I'm like, I'm sitting here thinking about the story we're going to tell, but okay, sure, I'll start wiping down some. He thinks I'm just an empty hand. Anyways, it was pretty funny.
The hoods of the cars at the dealership didn't already have like balloons and stuffed animals on them anyways.
Oh, dude. There was also a process.
We're gonna have to talk about this after.
We will talk this out. We'll talk about this after. We might bring it up later. We got to film them putting the balloons on, and that was amazing also.
I mean, that's cinematic gold.
Always
There's
always
nothing
be
hard to sell
rolling.
about that.
Always be rolling.
Oh god!
Did you film the giant like guy like the like air thing doing his
better?
We'll
We're going to
talk
talk about this
All right.
after.
All right.
Let's
We'll
talk about this after. Oh gosh. But then let's talk about it again.
All right.
Filmmakers, and then composers.
Just ones that I like. Are we talking like feature world or advertising
Like,
world or
who does Kevin Graham look up to, or look to in terms of like, you know, maybe it's directors or like what kinds of films you like. You mentioned Life and Planet Earth 2, so we don't need to dive on that anymore.
Yeah, those are cool. But I mean, not really my normal vibe. I'm an absolute sucker for like big, epic cinematic films that use a lot of practical effects. So like I'd be more inclined to really get into a film like Interstellar or like World War Z versus like, you know, Transformers or something like that. Not that I don't like those other movies, but I really like seeing movies where they did as much as they could on set.
Yeah.
And just in terms of like, my favorite director is Christopher Nolan. That's super basic and cliche, but it's just true because that style of storytelling really appeals to me and grips me. Like Interstellar is probably my favorite movie. I like Dunkirk a lot. So, and by default, like I obviously love Hans Zimmer. Yeah.
By default.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of my big orchestral works are like, and you can probably pretty easily tell, really heavily influenced by him and guys like Steve Jablonsky and like, you know, Newton Howard to a certain extent, or Danny Elfman. Just those guys and what they do with big orchestras and sounds. I mean, obviously, like it goes without saying, John Williams, but
He is. I mean, Hans Zimmer, Christopher Nolan, you know, they go in the same. They're in the same sentence.
Yeah.
John Williams and
Spielberg.
Spielberg.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Who else can basically just take two musical notes and make them equate danger for the duration of time? Like Jaws.
The duration of time.
Forever. People will hear those two notes and they will think something bad's going to happen. And the fact that a guy just did that with two music notes, to me, just blows my mind.
And I think it's translated through, like, genetics as well, like through evolution. Like, you can make those two sounds to my son, and he's never seen Jaws, and
Sure.
he knows.
dangerous. Yeah. That's getting into the whole science of whole steps and half steps, and why a minor chord sounds sad and why a major chord doesn't. But that's like a whole different thing. But yeah, I just so yeah, in the feature world, I love Nolan. I just love those big epic movies.
And there's no shame in that. That's not basic.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that.
We make big deals out of those movies. Like of going and seeing them or watching them together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some other like big ones, like, I don't know, maybe I'll use this platform. Personally, I think the last Star Wars movie was just an absolute abomination to everything we all know and love and hold dear.
Solo?
No, not
okay.
Solo. Solo was great. Last Jedi.
Okay, Last Jedi. Okay.
I'm just trying to think of big.
We'll
big
take
ones.
it.
No,
Yeah.
Solo. I liked Solo a lot. But maybe in terms of like the advertising world or corporate world or whatever, there's probably too much composers and filmmakers to name really that I look up to. I mean, I just browse through Artlist or MusicBed or any of those really. My favorite guy's probably Ludovico Einaudi. Like I'm sure you've heard his stuff. It's in a lot of big scores. He's a very minimalist, like piano composer.
Right.
I love how he does so much with so little notes, such simple chord progressions, but it just makes you feel like nothing else can really. So
right on.
There are so many good directors and filmmakers and composers, like just countless. I mean, like recently, I watched A Quiet Place and was blown away by
John Krasinski.
Yeah, I was blown away.
Yeah,
by it. Was that his direct? That was his debut.
Yeah,
yep.
It directing, and he starred in it too. Like the vibe of that movie was super sweet, and the score was cool. Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
I was blown away by how good that movie was. I mean, I guess I would ask, like, why didn't they just? Can we say spoilers on this for that?
Spoiler alert! If you have not watched A Quiet Place,
why didn't they just live?
Skip 45 seconds on your podcast app.
Why didn't they just live at the waterfall? Just saying.
All right. My gosh, what a what a great idea!
I have thought that as well, but you got to think about the seasons.
There's like a cave thing though, wasn't there? I don't know.
Yeah, it was.
Why didn't they at the very least just like have the kid there?
They were like 456 days into this.
Yeah,
like,
that's a long haul
or something like that.
That's a long haul of not being able to sneeze.
Yeah, well, you can't. Yeah, I agreed. Simple stuff like that for sure. But I think they would have had to build something, and a matter of building something would have caused some sort of noise as well.
I don't know.
Interesting.
That's my. I think that's what I.
Okay.
Anyways,
that's the way I justify.
Yeah, I don't care. I like that movie. I don't know why I brought that. Oh, just because I was trying to think of something like recent, like that I recently saw that I really liked and thought was really good.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's probably the main one.
Car dealerships.
The worst. For me.
That's how it ends.
My opinion.
The worst.
My opinion and my opinion alone. Not Mitch and Sam.
Next week, join us as we continue the discussions around filmmaking, running a small film shop, and more. And that's a wrap.